Jane Ganesh, a political columnist for the Financial Times, said in a column on Monday that May's wobbles bode badly for Brexit, meaning the negotiations over Britain's pending withdrawal from the European Union. Given her narrow experience, he said, the question is no longer what this government stands for, but whether it is any good. Or at least, whether it is good enough, given the work ahead. Then came the bombing. The events in Manchester have both allowed and required Mrs. May to reassert herself as Britain's reassuring grown-up, a trusted pair of hands on security issues, especially in contrast with her main rival, the Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn. It changes the narrative completely, at least for a time, said Tim Bale, a professor of politics at Queen Mary University of London. It's almost bound to play to the strengths of an incumbent prime minister, especially one responsible, in her previous job, for security. The risk for Mrs. May, he said, is that news could emerge that the government had bungled somehow, that someone fell down on the job, and this perpetrator was allowed to slip through. Still, he said, I honestly doubt that would make much difference now. Most people have an innate sympathy and realize that the security services have a difficult job and can't prevent 100%. The timing also favors her. All election campaigning has been suspended for a few days out of respect for the Manchester victims. It will resume nationally on Friday. But in the meantime, Mrs. May will be seen Thursday through Saturday representing Britain at the NATO summit in Brussels and then the G7 summit in Italy. While the Conservatives will not want to be seen as taking advantage of the horror, the party was already trying before the bombing to change the national conversation away from the U-turn by Mrs. May on social policy and toward Mr. Corbyn's old sympathies with Sinn Féin and the Irish Republican Army. The right-wing press, which supports the Conservatives, published material from Mr. Corbyn's decades-old file held by MI5, the domestic intelligence agency, which investigated his perfectly legal associations with Irish Republicans. In a television interview last Sunday, Mr. Corbyn refused numerous times to specifically condemn the IRA's bombing campaign in Britain. Instead, he insisted on condemning all the bombing by both the Loyalists and the IRA. After the Manchester bombing on Monday, security will be more prominent in people's minds, said Stephen Fielding, a professor of political history at the University of Nottingham. We don't know how prominent or for how long, but it will be closer to the front of important issues. He noted that over the weekend, as the Tories were struggling with issues over the dementia tax, there was suddenly a discussion of Corbyn, and the IRA security in general, Professor Fielding said, is already seen to be a weakness of Corbyn, who has insisted that he is not a pacifist and that he would renew Britain's nuclear deterrent, even though he could not imagine ever using it. So there can only be more questions about him after the Manchester bombing, Professor Fielding said, even if the Conservatives bend over backward, not to be seen to be exploiting a tragedy for political purposes. Professor Bale noted that attacks now on Corbyn for being soft on terrorism would probably backfire on the Conservatives for being opportunistic and in bad taste. But the right-wing news media is likely to raise the issue again as election day comes closer, given the Conservative strategy to make this election as much as possible about leadership and a straight choice between Mrs. May and Mr. Corbyn. Mrs. May will, of course, have the benefit of holding office in a time of crisis, said Tony Travers, a professor of government at the London School of Economics. Criticism leveled at her that she was a Home Office PM and perhaps did not have the breadth to understand all the issues a prime minister must is suddenly reversed when fears of terrorist attack, when the Home Office and security are the prime interest of the state, and it fits her, he said. But the Manchester attack will tend to fade in people's minds before they actually vote, he argued, saying that the underlying forces that produce general election results are years in the making and are rarely affected by what happens in campaigns. And in general, he said, Britons believe that the best way of making ourselves resilient is to keep on and get back to normal. Professor Bale agreed, noting that the murder of Joe Cox, a popular member of parliament who opposed Britain's exit from the European Union just a few days before last June's referendum, did not have a large impact on the vote. It's very easy to see these absolutely terrible events as game changers, but they rarely are, he said. And partly, sadly, because they are more common than they used to be. Continue reading the main story.